Invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. Has the Labour government taken us back to the 1970s? From today, council taxes, energy and water bills, stamp duty and income tax have all gone up, all from the party of growth. Meanwhile, I'll be joined by KC, who has bravely spoken out against DEI initiatives in the judiciary amongst the two-tier justice row between the government and the courts. I'll also be speaking to someone who's been supporting the abortion protester whose court judgment could determine whether the UK agrees a trade deal with the United States. Plus, after being told by John Bulletin last night that Vladimir Putin is playing Donald Trump, tonight I will ask that very question to one of Putin's former prime ministers of Russia. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by a particularly pugnacious panel this evening, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the political consultant and former Labour candidate, Kevin Craig. As ever, it's a crucial part of the programme. Let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Tatiana Sanchez.
Jacob, thank you very much and good evening. The top stories: millions of households across the country are seeing their bills increasing today, from energy and water prices to council tax and stamp duty. The hikes in prices and tax coincide with the new financial year and what's being dubbed Awful April for consumers. Water bills are increasing by an average of £10 a month in England and Wales, whilst gas and electricity are up by £111 a year. Meanwhile, the basic salary for members of Parliament has increased by 2.8%. And the national living wage, up 6.7% this month, is worth £1,386 a year more to someone working a 40-hour week who can now pull down an annual salary of more than £23,000. In other news, the White House says the US is open to taking calls on tariffs, as it said the tariffs announcement will be one of the most important days in US history. That's as the Foreign Secretary David Lammy earlier said the UK must prepare for the worst, as President Trump is set to introduce an array of tariffs tomorrow. Downing Street says the UK is at an advanced stage in talks with the US, adding that good progress has been made and all options are on the table. President Trump said last night he is settled on a tariff plan and says the US will be nice. His tariffs, including a 25% tariff on all cars imports, will be announced on his so-called Liberation Day tomorrow and will come into effect immediately. Downing Street says the UK government is working with Mauritius to finalise a deal on the future of the Chagos Islands after the US signalled its consent. President Trump indicated during a visit to Washington by Sir Keir Starmer in February that he'd support the deal, saying, "I have a feeling it's going to go quite very well." Under the proposed agreement, Mauritius would gain sovereignty of the islands from the UK, but allow the US and UK to continue operating a military base on one of the islands for an initial period of 99 years at a cost to the British taxpayer. UK government sources have indicated they're not waiting for further sign-off from Donald Trump. Earlier this year, Foreign Secretary David Lammy said the deal would not go ahead if the US president had objections. And a decorated World War II codebreaker who spent her youth deciphering enemy messages at Bletchley Park has died at the age of 101. Charlotte Betty Webb, MBE, who was among the last surviving Bletchley codebreakers, died last night. Mrs Webb joined operations at the Buckinghamshire base at the age of 18, later going on to help with Japanese codes at the Pentagon in the US. She was awarded France's highest honour in 2021. The Women's Royal Army Corps Association described her as a woman who inspired women in the army for decades. And those are the latest headlines for now. More news from me in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Rees, stood before the Commons last week and delivered her emergency budget after her efforts last year pummeled the economy. Once again, she gambled on having to return with another sweeping tax rate later this year, leaving the British economy balancing on a knife edge.
More money in the pockets of working people. Higher living standards promised by this Labour government, delivered by this Labour government, opposed by the parties opposite.
Which seems to be in a different world, but since then, spring has truly sprung across Great Britain, indeed the United Kingdom. The sun has been shining even in counties beyond Somerset, so much that some parts of our nation have been warmer than Athens. But with the new month came an ominously looming dark cloud, what the Conservatives have labelled Awful April. The Labour Party of Working People, a term that the Prime Minister has previously struggled to define, has ensured that almost all households and businesses across the country will be hit by soaring bills caused by the government or its agencies. 9 in 10 councils are increasing bills by the maximum 5%. Car tax has risen by another £5 and water bills by £10 a month. Getting on the property ladder has become more difficult for first-time buyers as the tax-free stamp duty threshold has been slashed from £425,000 to £300,000, and the energy price cap has risen by a higher-than-expected 6.4%, with Ofgem blaming rising global prices, echoing the Chancellor's tendencies to blame our own economic woes solely on the instability of global politics. But let's not forget that energy prices in this country remain 4 times higher than America's, thanks to Mr Miliband's continued net zero zealotry. But fear not, because the Prime Minister said this morning he is giving everyone a pay rise, as the government once again sought generously to put money back in the pockets of you, the working people. The national living wage has increased by 6.7% and moved cheered as always by Labour MPs as some form of unequivocal good. But it has to be paid for, and it's not helping get those who are unemployed onto the employment ladder. Rather, as the Resolution Foundation, a left-wing think tank, has warned, a decision that will make hiring people more expensive by 14%. With business confidence at a 2-year low, surveys are suggesting firms will freeze hiring or cut staff altogether. And worse, the rise in labour costs will be felt most keenly in the lowest 10% of workers. It will be the poorest employees who are most likely to end up jobless. About 85,000 roles could be cut across the country. All these decisions are voluntary, government-driven ones, which will put up inflation, keep interest rates high, reduce economic activity, and hit the public finances. The government itself is creating an economic downward spiral. As the impact of these price rises begin to become clearer for working people across the country, the government will be nervously anticipating what US President Donald Trump has called Liberation Day. The White House this evening reportedly drafted a proposal for the US to impose tariffs of 20% on most imports from tomorrow, Downing Street indicating a British exemption deal will not be reached in time. If you're hanging on to the hope of no further tax rises this year, Trump tariffs could be the final nail in the coffin. A member of the Budget Watchdog Committee has warned the Chancellor's fiscal headroom that she desperately clawed back in her emergency budget would be wiped out by a 20 to 25% tariff. The Chancellor would be forced back to the drawing board, forcing you to once again pay the price. As ever, let me know your views, mail Mogg at gbnews.com. I'm now joined by my particularly pugnacious panel, Kelvin Mackenzie and Kevin Craig. Kevin, I'll go to you first, as you're obviously a former Labour candidate. What really worries me about today's price rises is that they are all set by government agencies, that you've got council tax going up, you've got car tax going up, you've got gas prices going up set by Ofgem. And actually, when we're trying to get out of an inflationary period, this is the wrong time for government charges to be going up.
So inflation, you mentioned, it's currently at 3% in 2022. When you were in government, it was at 11%.
Yes, but it was at 2%.
Come on, Kevin, that is ridiculous. We were in the middle of COVID.
Opened my mouth, right, to this, well, barely, right, barely. So there's that. Council tax is set by councils of different political persuasions across the country.
But the government has the ability to set a limit above which there's a referendum, and they set it at 5%.
One of the reasons why people voted the way they did in 2024 is that citizens of the country can see that local services are being run down over a considered
What, all these
period of
DEI
time.
officers that councils are employing?
That's not the reason.
Record number of council bosses getting over £100,000 a year.
Those are tiny elements of overall local authority budgets, and I think I've served the longest on a local authority on this panel, so I do know what I'm talking about. Let's go to fuel. OK, well, fuel duty has not been put up by this government. In fact, the former Conservative Chancellor, Kenneth Clarke, said he's surprised that the government didn't do it. And Ofgem, you're quite right. At the end of this Parliament, the measure is, will Labour deliver cheaper bills? And the viewers and listeners of your show they live in the real world, and they will judge. And Labour knows that it has to get those things down. I will say that one of the things I like about a Labour government being in charge is they don't try and pretend everything is rosy. It isn't, OK?
Oh, come on. Rachel Rees, in her emergency budget last week, tried to pretend everything was rosy.
No, because
she said we were all going to be £500 a year better off, which was nonsense.
What the government is saying is that some things are going in the right direction. You talked about it. The national living wage has gone up 10% in 2024.
But the national living wage has to be paid for.
Yes, of course. I know that. I started
you're a businessman.
I know.
It
employs lots of people. It's worth millions of pounds.
Combined with the increase in national insurance,
I know that.
This is really inflationary.
Well, let's see about that. I mean, we are judging a Labour government is not even in power for 3/4 of a year, right? It will be later this week. And there's a context of a long time of economic mismanagement, I would say.
Well, I do agree with the last bit, by the way, that 14 years under the Tories has been a disaster, an absolute disaster, which is why, of course, that the Reform are the go-to party for people of the right currently. And honestly, Kemi Badenoch needs to start learning from the Farage playbook and not from some kind of Lib Dem view of what conservatism looks like. So that's a shocker. I agree with that. I do agree that the Ofgem, right, it's more or less global, but with a good dollop of zealotry coming from our Energy Secretary. Other things, though, for instance, parking my car tonight, £11.35 for the station at Weybridge Station, the station car park. These are shocking numbers. You take your own business. What's business like? It's tough out there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's tough
out there.
On record,
and it's not made easier by the fact... So, for instance, take minimum pay. In my own household, I have a relative who has got on minimum pay. OK? She was one of 3 million who will have got the pay rise. They are the bottom 10%. They will be the people that will be thrown out of work most easily by the fact that companies look at their payrolls, look at the cost of employing people and say, somebody has to go. We're just going to have to do that. It's a shocking moment for everybody. I can't quite understand why, if you accept that actually companies haven't got that kind of money to pay out without the consequence of letting somebody go, why they decide we have to do it. They say that there's a £22 billion black hole.
Correct.
Well, they're now going to have a black hole, by the sound of it, of equivalent size, having already taxed us. Why don't people just stop handing out money? For instance, on the minimum pay thing, that is a cost. Probably not to you, because none of your employees will be on minimum pay, which is probably why they're going to have to be let go. But how can you just say to companies like Tesco's and the like, you are going to have to pay this money, and if you don't like it, let somebody go? Surely that's anti-socialist, isn't it?
Well, no, anti-socialist, I'm not sure. I see what you mean. Yeah. Business has been asked to shoulder this burden in the employer's national insurance rise, but it wasn't an easy decision. But as you say, the government had to find it from somewhere, and the idea that there will be a direct read across to massive job losses, I think, is open to debate.
But Kelvin, Rachel Rees
Kevin, and that's Kelvin.
I knew I'd get it wrong eventually.
Yeah.
The budget last year, there was 40-odd billion of extra expenditure. That it was a choice to put this burden onto businesses, and businesses don't exist in a vacuum. So if you put up the cost of businesses, that leads to price rises, and that keeps interest rates higher, which makes it harder to grow the economy. It's just a fundamentally flawed economic policy.
Well, that is open to debate because businesses have to be profitable. They have to be able to pay their people properly, and they have to pay the taxes that are required by the country in which they are based in order that the government where they are based can provide a decent society.
But so much business is international, and they're looking for their net margin.
But we are indeed, and you know that because you've got investments all over the place, like I'm sure the rest of us on this panel do. But nonetheless, the country in 2024 last year, people came to the conclusion that we were suffering from years of decline, and what the government isn't doing is playing havoc.
By the way, I do accept that. But what I didn't know was that when you voted in this rather strange way, as it now turns out, because if you held the vote tomorrow, I suspect it wouldn't look anything like July the 4th result. And I think you might agree with that, Kevin. Right? But we were down on our knees. Yeah. Now we're lying on the floor. Our country, everybody you speak to in my kind of world, which I agree is a kind of middle-class, businessy kind of world, everybody's saying, how the hell can we get out of our country? Kelvin, I have never known.
Kelvin, so listen, the NHS has got loads more appointments happening. It's starting to come on stream because of what the government has done.
Because of left-wing strikes, but unfortunately, on reminding people of the left being on strike, I must thank my panel and tell you what's coming up next, because I'm going to be joined by the great Joshua Rosenberg on the two-tiered justice row, as well as one man who has bravely spoken out against DEI in the judiciary. Thank you. Sorry to cut you off.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
The Daily Mail. White glamour model Martina Big, 36, who, quote, identifies as black, quote, after having tanning... I can't do it. Who identifies as black, quote, after having tanning injections, and this is the kicker at the end of it, announces plan to move to Africa. Yeah. There's so much to unpack here. This is a woman called Martina Big, who is well-named.
That's her birth name.
That is her birth name, but also the description of her chest. She's spent quite a lot of money getting the largest breasts in Europe. She now, however, has been injecting herself with some kind of pigment or colouring system to turn her from white to black.
Let's have a look.
So
this is before.
This is before, and then it's quite a shocking shift here. She's been to Kenya to go and meet the Masai Mara. They've christened her. They've given her a baptism, and so she's now believing that she is Kenyan, and she's going over to Kenya. So what is weird about this is it's like, obviously the...
Tell us what's weird about it.
What is weird about it? There's obviously the initial thought of like, that's really inappropriate. This is black-facing, but not even in a temporary way. Yeah. But then hang on. She wants to be living her true life. So maybe she should be. This is where it's all got tied up in itself. Steve used to be a black woman. Steve Gage, our correspondent.
What's the difference in blackface here and what gender-critical women would call women face, which they would say that's how they address men, biological men, now saying that they're women. They would say it's the same, like Dylan Mulvaney, who is, as far as I know, still an intact male, but sort of prancing around and sort of being this kind of...
like a girl.
Yeah, like I'm a girl and that's very offensive to women.
In fact, this woman actually has a greater claim because evolutionarily she will have black ancestors.
Of course, we all do.
Yeah, so...
And, according to her, she will, and I'm not a doctor, but she will have black children.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg. Well, last night, the Sentencing Council withdrew its two-tier justice guidelines hours before it was set to take effect. Indeed, they didn't get the message to the courts until after it had nominally taken effect, after the government threatened legislation to block the rules. Earlier today, the Lord Chancellor, Shabina Mahmood, addressed the House of Commons.
Thank the Sentencing Council for putting a pause on their guidelines whilst Parliament has its say. I believe that we must reverse them and reassert that no race or religion should receive preferential treatment before the law, and the bill we will introduce today will achieve that.
Well, I'm joined now by the legal commentator Joshua Rosenberg. Joshua, thank you as always for joining me. This is quite a humiliation for the Sentencing Council, isn't it, that Overreach sent an arrogant letter to the Lord Chancellor and has now had to back down?
It obviously felt that if Parliament was going to legislate, and we've now seen the bill that Shabana Mahmood has introduced, then it's appropriate to put this on pause. It wouldn't be right for courts, that's judges and magistrates, to have one set of guidelines last month in March, another one this month in April, and perhaps a new one next month in May.
But they were really forceful, weren't they? And saying, Lord Justice Davis saying to the Lord Chancellor that this threatened the independence of the judiciary. But it doesn't really, does it? Because this is a matter for Parliament. The Council was set up by Parliament, and it's for Parliament to decide what its remit is.
If Shabana Mahmood had personally told the Sentencing Council what to do, given that it has a majority of judges, I think that would threaten their independence. If Parliament says this is what you must do, then certainly the Sentencing Council is going to accept that all judges do what Parliament say.
But do you think the judges are overreaching in the approach that they're taking? There was a brilliant piece in the Times today, which I hope you'll forgive me for quoting to you, which ends by saying, a judiciary that's unable to acknowledge the extent of its own ideological capture is not a bulwark at all, it's a gaping hole in the constitutional wall. I couldn't have put it better myself.
And neither could my wife, who wrote it, as you imply. But that is certainly a perfectly fair argument. It all really depends on Shabana Mahmood's argument, which is that this is a matter of policy. If it's a matter of policy, then, as you say, it's a matter for Parliament. If it's not a matter of policy, then it's a matter for the judiciary. And Shabana Mahmood draws this direct link between the impact that a pre-sentence report is likely to have if it's carried out from somebody from an ethnic minority or a cultural minority or whatever. A direct link between the pre-sentence report and the likely outcome. She says it's more likely to discourage a judge from sending an offender to jail. And she says that's what creates the perception of differential treatment. Now, if that's the case, if there is a direct link, well, perhaps it is a matter of policy. But if it's simply something that the judge takes into account when the judge decides what sentence is going to be passed, then that's another matter.
But isn't it an even higher point than that, that it's actually fundamental to our legal system that we are all equal in front of the law, and that neither judges nor politicians should do anything that undermines that basic principle?
That is right, but you have to accept the reality, which is that pre-sentence reports cost money and take time, and partly because of cuts in the probation service by a government that you will be familiar with, we don't have enough probation officers to do pre-sentence reports into all defendants. So you have to decide which offenders are going to get them and which are not, and what the Sentencing Council tried to do was to indicate the ones who would benefit most from a pre-sentence report and say that they should normally receive them, others wouldn't necessarily have to receive them.
All right. Thank you very much, Joshua. It's always a pleasure to have you on the programme. Well, with me now is Colin Winter, KC, who has spoken out against diversity, equity and inclusion in the judiciary. Colin, the first question I want to ask you is I wonder if the Sentencing Council is necessary at all, because by having an intermediary body between Parliament and the courts, yes, you limit judicial freedom and independence in individual cases. Parliament sets out the sentencing, the judges apply it, and then you've got a quango unaccountable to anybody. It's not the judiciary, it's not politicians. How does this fit constitutionally?
Well, in the old days, I remember when I was a pupil barrister back in the 80s, going along to the Court of Appeal, seeing the Lord Chief Justice hand down sentences, revised sentences, in a group of cases that had been put together for the purpose of establishing the right benchmark, the right tariffs for those offences. I think what the Sentencing Council does, which is valuable, is to try and provide consistency throughout the judicial system. So and I've got here the most recent guidelines, and in amongst the parts we may talk about in a moment, there is it sets out how a court should go about sentencing, what steps to take, and those stages help to ensure that each defendant is dealt with in a consistent manner, and that's good for justice. Where it comes a bit unstuck is where you deal with the pre-sentence reports, and I went through them yesterday, and the Lord Justice William Davis spoke about certain cohorts of individuals who might benefit from PSRs. And I went through it and I worked out the only people who are not included are white Anglo-Saxon men who are either Church of England or atheist, who are not addicted to drugs, not looking after a dependent, and are not trans, and not suffering from chronic illness.
Right. Oh, so Catholics get a special
Well, it's a faith minority. Depends whether you see it as that or not. I don't think the intention was to have... I think probably Christian is majority. Right. You could argue, if you were had a good lawyer and were minded to do so, that Catholic is a minority faith.
Yes, indeed. So I might get a special treatment.
But the important point to make, sorry, Jacob, is that this is guidance.
Yes.
And it also talks about this being a non-exhaustive list.
But how important is guidance? That is to say, if the judge doesn't follow the guidance, does that give you a prima facie case for an appeal on your sentence?
I can't say for sure, but it certainly is the case that any guidance is normally... The idea of guidance is to be followed. Now, you can depart from guidance, and even in this, the latest guidance, it does provide for that. But what normally happens with guidance is that you feel you have to give reasons why you departed from it. You have to explain why you departed from it. So you expect guidance to be followed.
And Joshua is making the reasonable point that resources are limited. Fair enough. But shouldn't the limited resources be applied fairly depending on the individual's circumstances rather than the individual's attributes?
I would say so, but it's notable in Lord Justice Davis's letter to, or his publication after his spat with Shabina Mahmood, he actually says, passage that this process identifies particular cohorts for whom evidence suggests PSRs might be of particular value to the court. And I think what he's hinting at there is that there may be certain groups of people about whom judges, typical judges, do not have a full knowledge or understanding. The question then arises whether those are factors that should be taken into account to the extent that they are suggested in this report they should be.
But you would have thought that judges being judges don't have a full understanding of criminals, that that's sort of in the nature of the two different ways of life, and that it is fundamentally unfair to discriminate on the basis of race and sex.
Yes.
And women, why all women?
Yes.
As a matter of course, when I would have thought judges would be pretty easily able to see that a woman had different experiences from a man. It wouldn't be that complicated for a judge.
No, and I think that certainly when I used to do crime back in the 80s and 90s, what one was told and what one practiced was that anything which was relevant to that person's circumstances, which might be helpful, you'd want to put before the court. Now, the problem is that counsel can't give evidence. We can wax lyrical about things which are known to the judge, but in terms of details of how that person lives, their home life, their background circumstances, that has to be put into evidence by somebody else.
But can you get that in evidence if the defendant gives evidence?
Well, I think certainly at the trial stage, one is talking about the offence rather than the circumstances.
The circumstances.
That will come afterwards in mitigation. So counsel, very good counsel, can wax lyrical. Silver-tongued counsel can do magical things, but they can't rustle up a suggestion that you go on probation.
But can counsel do that after the verdicts come in from the jury? Can't they say to the judge, well, you should give this chap a lighter sentence because of X, Y, or Z?
Yes, that's what counsel always do. But I think you're helped. And I remember my first case, criminal case, was a serious case down in Winchester. And I heard my pupil master talking to my clerk about it. Could Colin Winter do this? Because it was quite serious. And they were both expressing anxiety, but I was sent off anyway. I got to Winchester a bit late because the train had broken down. Got there, I went to the probation office to get the social inquiry report. And I asked, can I have 10 minutes? The judge gave me 10 minutes. He said, no, we're coming straight on. So I walk in, shuffling through this document, and before I can finish reading it, the case is called on. The judge, I rise to address the judge in a panic. He said, Mr. Winter, I've read the social inquiry report, and I intend to follow its recommendations. So I sat down having...
Going, phew.
Yes. And so I called Chambers saying that I'd got this fantastic result, and that sort of made my reputation amongst my junior colleagues.
And it was luck. And sort of final thought.
Yes.
How have we got to this state where DEI is infecting our judicial system?
Well, I'm going to be careful what I say here. I mean, the biggest example of DEI in the judiciary, and I've focused most of my attention on the Bar Standards Board and its approach to diversity and equity, but the biggest example I can give is in the Equal Treatment Bench Book. It uses terms such as assigned at birth. Now, I do not understand how any lawyer can go along with the term assigned at birth, but it's in there, it's used when talking about defendants, and it's been there for a while now.
And it's fundamentally undermining the principle that we are all equal before the law.
Well, it just departs from common sense, and I wish they would correct that. But somebody has managed to put it into the minds of whoever puts the books together that this is an appropriate term to use about people, that they are assigned at birth, and they're not. They're observed.
All right, Colin, thank you very much indeed. Shortly, I'll be speaking to someone who is supporting Donald Trump's favourite abortion protester. His case could determine whether or not the UK manages to get a free trade deal with the United States. Plus, I'll be asking the former Russian Prime Minister whether Donald Trump has been played by Putin.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hi there. If you're heading further afield over the next few days, it is going to be unsettled across much of the Mediterranean, particularly for Greece, where very lively showers and thunderstorms will continue during Wednesday. Showery for southern Italy, but northern Italy largely fine with some sunshine. South of France into Spain and Portugal. We've got spells of rain moving in along with a gusty wind, and that unsettled weather sticks around for the end of the week, whilst the showers become fewer and less frequent in Greece.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back. So Keir Starmer's attempts to strike a free trade deal with the US are at risk over a free speech row. Livia Tossica-Bolt, a 64-year-old woman, is facing prosecution for holding a sign outside an abortion clinic in Bournemouth that displayed the message, "Here to talk if you want to." The US State Department has now taken the extraordinary step of weighing in, issuing concerns over freedom of expression in Britain. It has warned that no free speech means no free trade. Well, I'm joined now by Robert Clark, barrister and Director of Advocacy for ADF International, which is supporting Livia Tossica-Bolt's case. Thank you very much for joining me. You must be quite pleased to get the support of the US State Department over this case.
Well, it's quite an unusual thing. The reality is no one likes to get told off, right? No one enjoys that. But what we have to ask ourselves is, are they right? And at the heart of this case, there is a woman who was on trial last month because she held up a sign on a public street that said, "Here to talk if you want." And the bottom line is that can't be right.
And this was in a buffer zone, which the council had implemented near an abortion clinic. And her sign was saying, "Free to talk."
Exactly. So this took place within a local public spaces protection order. This was a power that was given to local councils to deal with antisocial behaviour. And in this case, Bournemouth Council have decided to create a PSPO that makes it essentially a criminal offence to protest. And they define that in a very, unusual way, let's say. They define it as including any expression of approval or disapproval of abortion. And so she was within this area. She didn't mention abortion. The sign that she was carrying didn't mention abortion. It just said, "Here to talk if you want." She was there to engage in consensual conversations if people wanted to. And yet the council decided that that was enough to breach the terms of their buffer zone and have prosecuted her. She was there. She was on trial in the Magistrates' Court last month, and the verdict is expected this week on Friday.
OK, so that will be decided by the court. So there's the broader issue of how much should free speech be limited, and should people be obstructed or worried or in any way interfered with when they're going about their lawful business, even if you and I think that lawful business is one of the greatest risks to society?
Well, let me deal with that head on, because the only argument that I ever hear in favour of these wide-ranging, vague, overbroad zones is that they are there to protect women from harassment. Everyone can agree that women shouldn't be harassed. They shouldn't be harassed on their way to an abortion facility. They shouldn't be harassed on any public street. And the good news is that we have criminal laws in place that prohibit harassment. They're available to the authorities, they're available to the police, and they were available before this zone came into effect. They continue to be available to this day. But the interesting thing is that the previous government did a study to determine whether it should bring in these kind of zones. Was the widespread harassment taking place outside of abortion facilities across the country? And the conclusion of that study was no. There was no justification to bring in these zones on a nationwide basis, that the police already had sufficient powers to be able to deal with any incidents that arose. And of course, in this case, remember what we're talking about is a woman holding a sign saying, "Here to talk if you want." But let's zoom out from Livia for a minute. In Birmingham, I imagine many people have seen, by the looks of things at this point, Isabel Vaughan-Spruce being arrested because she told officers that she might be praying. She was stood there motionless and silent Up in Scotland, Rose Doherty being handcuffed, grandmother being handcuffed outside of a hospital because she had a sign saying coercion is a crime, here to talk if you want. And so the US doing what it has done it's unusual. It's not unprecedented, but it is unusual. But we're living in unusual times. The idea that people are being prosecuted for peacefully standing on public streets and either praying silently or just offering to talk is absurd and is a violation of the most fundamental right to be able to speak freely and even think freely.
Well, thank you very much, Robert. My panel is still with me, Kelvin Mackenzie and Kevin Craig. Kelvin, it always seems to me that the organisations that really try to stop free speech are ones who think their own argument is weak, and they're actually quite ashamed of these abortion clinics which kill the unborn, and therefore they don't want anyone to know about them. They want it all to be done as secretly as possible.
OK, well, so I'm in favour of abortion clinics, and I'm in favour of people being able to have an abortion. I'm also in favour of what that man was saying. I'm in favour of the free speech and the discussion. And I want to know how this is going to play out. This is the first time I've ever heard the argument that there is an emotional argument and a personal argument and a free speech argument, a political argument, all merging together, right? I have not heard that since 1968, when I think David Steele, pushed this through. And my question is this: in the United States, when that abortion was put down by the Supreme Court, each individual state was allowed the opportunity to decide whether they wanted to allow abortion in their state or not. Tonight, 19 of the 50 states don't allow abortion. It doesn't stop people going across the state line somewhere else. But that's what I call free speech. So in this country, what would happen? Could we end up with Wales? Or I think it's been suggested, would Northern Ireland, if it held a referendum? Which way would they vote on this issue? So what we're being denied is free speech, and that's where the argument, that's what I both like and worry about Trump, is that he has for the first time, or his people in this case, have for the first time offered the reverse opportunity to what we're all told is, quotes, good for us.
And Kevin, I thought the argument that Robert was putting is very important. There are plenty of laws to protect people if there are violent protests or aggressive protests or harassment, but that free speech means you have to listen to things that you don't necessarily want to hear, doesn't it?
Well, it does, but the changes were brought in over here because women felt threatened and intimidated when they were visiting abortion clinics. So these additional protections were brought in, and I think they were a good thing. I respect very much, and I know you're one of the people of faith in particular who are very, very against abortion, listen to the way you just described it. But I don't want us to go down the route of America where abortion is so politicised. And, free speech is interesting. How is America, the so-called, home of free speech, going around to countries and saying, if you don't do what we like on things like diversity, then we're not going to do business with your country? So there's I think there's a conflict in this. There's different things here. There's the policy on abortion and what happens when people go into clinics, and then there's what the Trump administration is doing on free speech or not.
Isn't there a bigger problem in this country about freedom of speech, that we've had the police arresting people for WhatsApp messages, we've had the couple told they couldn't speak to their local councillor. We seem to have daily news of attacks on freedom of speech and a state that is becoming more restrictive about things that it doesn't like. And this isn't particularly Labour Party. This was going on when the Conservatives were in office. And that actually freedom of speech is fundamental to democracy. And it's easy to chip away when it's an activity that you want to support. It's very hard to stand up for freedom of speech when people are having it restricted to your benefit, but that's actually when you've got to do it.
No, I mean, I do agree with you that freedom of speech is important, but I think there are, certain other things that also have to be respected.
What about the situation, for instance, in Birmingham, for instance? So these pickets are blocking the right for the rubbish trucks to come out and clear the streets of what is a disgusting health hazard. So that nobody's arrested there, right? Nobody's arrested there, right? You're allowed to do that, but you're not allowed to come within 50 metres of an abortion clinic because it may be correct, it may not be correct. They said that somebody was harassed. The reason that lady was arrested, because the police officer said that somebody felt harassed by that sign. OK, we don't know whether it was an employee of the abortion clinic or a woman.
But feeling harassed isn't good enough.
Well,
You've got to be harassed or be intimidated.
Women, I would argue, I remember when we debated this when I was on Lambeth Council for 17 years, this came up. Women were being intimidated by right-to-life protesters when they were going to abortion
But there are laws
clinics.
about that are different from holding up a
But
poster.
they weren't strong enough. And since
Right,
these, and it's a good discussion. You could debate it for an hour because it actually links back to the issue of abortion. Kelvin's point about Birmingham and the bins. I mean, you know.
Well, we're going to have to leave that for another night because I've got a Russian Prime Minister to speak to. So thank you to my panel. I'm going to be speaking to a former Prime Minister of Russia under Putin and asking him whether Donald Trump has been played by the Russian president.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The sunshine continues tomorrow. It will be a little bit chilly overnight, warming up as we go through the day. Again, though, some places having a noticeably cool breeze. Notice quite a few isobars across the UK. High pressure, though, is the dominant feature. That is what is bringing us the sunshine. With the easterly breeze, we could start to see a little bit more low cloud just lapping onto some of these coasts in the east, and particularly inland over the hills. So the Pennines and the Grampians could see some low cloud developing. But for most, it's a clear night, and that will allow temperatures to dip to single figures. Pockets of frost possible in rural areas. Still a noticeable breeze blowing across the south, quite gusty, particularly this evening across the far southwest. But the winds are pretty light across mainland Scotland. Certainly inlands, we could see a hint of frost, just a whiff of blue there on the chart. And there could be some of this hard just sticking to the east coast at times for tomorrow. Could be a bit grey as well across parts of southern Scotland, northern England, again over high ground, but clear to start off with in Northern Ireland, Wales and the bulk of England. Again, though, quite a cool breeze blowing across some southern counties, and more noticeable perhaps across East Anglia into Lincolnshire, this breeze as we go through tomorrow. Light winds could mean this cloud is quite stubborn across parts of the coast of the east of Scotland, but we should again see lots of sunshine over the Highlands. That could be where we see the highest temperatures once more, because inland after that chilly start, temperatures getting into the mid to maybe high teens, perhaps not quite as mild as today. And with that breeze coming from the North Sea, those eastern coasts will be chilly. Bit of a change for Thursday, more cloud in the southwest, even a few showers for Somerset, Devon, Cornwall, perhaps parts of South Wales could catch a shower. Elsewhere though, another sunny one on Thursday. Still a brisk chilly breeze in the east, but elsewhere turning a bit warmer across the heart and southeast of England, where we could see those temperatures getting over 20 Celsius.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as
and now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Over the past few weeks, President Donald Trump has expressed frustration over Russian President Vladimir Putin's refusal to accept his proposed Ukraine ceasefire deal. He has since threatened to impose tariffs of up to 50% on countries buying Russian oil if Putin does not agree to the ceasefire. Yesterday, I spoke to John Bolton, former US National Security Advisor to Trump, and he told me Donald Trump was in fact being played by Putin. Well, I'm now joined by a former Prime Minister of Russia under Vladimir Putin, Mikhail Kazyanov. Thank you so much for joining me. From your experience of Putin, what is he now trying to do? And does he respect Donald Trump, or does he think Donald Trump is another gullible Westerner who he can pull by the nose?
Yeah, of course, Mr. Putin is manipulating and he is playing game, and he understands that President Trump wants, as soon as possible, he wants ceasefire agreement to demonstrate to the people who elected him and to the whole world that he achieved what he promised. But Mr. Putin understands this and trying to raise additional demands, playing game, dragging out time.
And how long can Putin go on doing this? I mean, Donald Trump is already indicating that he's losing patience. Are there consequences that Russia fears from America, or does Putin just not care, really?
First, I think just Mr. Putin doesn't believe that Mr. Trump would lose his patience. And in fact, he continues to creating different conditions, proposals for improving U.S.-Russia relations, something like this, just getting out of the concrete proposal. There was a simple, clear proposal made by Donald Trump first, unconditional ceasefire. Ukrainian president immediately accepted, Mr. Putin rejected. That is demonstration that he doesn't want ceasefire now, because of the simple reason. Right now, Mr. Putin feels himself quite on a stable financial position. All people on the battlefield, they're about finance, about money. That today, Putin has money. But on a later stage, situation will start changing. That's why just he understands that Trump wants the deal right now, transaction now, but Putin would be prepared for any concessions only just in a 1 year time, or at least several months, but not upcoming 2 or 3 months. It's impossible to have any agreement with him just in June, in April, in May, in June, but later, late autumn, it would be possible.
And so you think that basically Russia has the money for the next 6 months or so to keep on fighting away in Ukraine, that Putin thinks he's got the upper hand. From your experience of being Prime Minister of Russia, what do you think Trump could do that could change this? Is there anything he can do, or does he just have to accept Putin's conditions?
Yes, of course. The United States administration has leverage, but it is very difficult because it's a little bit, I would say, completely contrary to Mr. Trump's promises to cut expenditures, to cut the budget expenditure. In fact, there are two levels of pressure. One of them, which doesn't directly connected with the additional expenditure of U.S. government, but it is related to the market, oil price. But to reduce oil price considerably, asking Saudis and U.S. industry to produce more oil and to demand to offer more oil to the market, it could press the price down to $60 per barrel. It is already just something. In this case, Putin will get $45 per barrel, while his budget built up on expectation to get $70 per barrel. That will be like a minus $30 billion during a year, per year. Putin spends $150 billion for the war. Just minus 30, that is not a catastrophic thing. But if President Trump loses his patience and just change his policy, not to reduce support for Ukraine, but increase, in this case, will be double pressure on Putin. In this case, by the end of the year, definitely Putin will be a different person, would be willing to have a ceasefire and negotiate comprehensive peace agreement.
Okay, is there any weapons that could be provided to Ukraine that would help?
Yes, absolutely. That's what I mean.
So it's weaponry and money. Exactly. Money being lost by Russia and weapons going to Ukraine. Well, thank you very much, Mikhail, for a very clear exposition and for sparing your time with us this evening. That's all from me until next week. Next, it's the one and only Patrick Christys. But Patrick, this must be an April Fool. But I hear there's been rain in Somerset. That surely can't be true.
No, it was purely an April Fool's. Not true. Glorious sunshine. Everyone's had the factor 50 on all day. Anyway, loads on tonight. So Prince Andrew's ex-girlfriend joins me live on this show. She thinks that Virginia Giuffre is a liar, so she's going to blow the lid off that particular scandal. I'm also going to take you live to Lesotho in Africa to get the mood on the ground after Prince Harry's charity exit. I've been to Bromley today to find out how people feel about the fact that literally every single bill that you can ever imagine is going up, despite Keir Starmer's promise, and it was a promise, to make us all feel wealthier. I've got all that, as well as Albanians breaking into Britain. But, of course, it is now the weather.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The sunshine continues tomorrow. It will be a little bit chilly overnight, warming up as we go through the day. Again, though, some places having a noticeably cool breeze. Notice quite a few isobars across the UK. High pressure, though, is the dominant feature. That is what is bringing us the sunshine. With the easterly breeze, we could start to see a little bit more low cloud just lapping onto some of these coasts in the east, and particularly inland over the hills. So the Pennines and the Grampians could see some low cloud developing, but for most it's a clear night, and that will allow temperatures to dip to single figures. Pockets of frost possible in rural areas. Still a noticeable breeze blowing across the south, quite gusty, particularly this evening across the far southwest. But the winds are pretty light across mainland Scotland. Certainly inlands we could see a hint of frost, just a whiff of blue there on the chart, and there could be some of this hard just sticking to the east coast at times for tomorrow. Could be a bit grey as well across parts of southern Scotland, northern England, again over high ground, but clear to start off with in Northern Ireland, Wales and the bulk of England. Again, though, quite a cool breeze blowing across some southern counties, and more noticeable perhaps across East Anglia into Lincolnshire, this breeze as we go through tomorrow. Light winds could mean this cloud is quite stubborn across parts of the coast of the east of Scotland, but we should again see lots of sunshine over the Highlands. That could be where we see the highest temperatures once more, because inland after that chilly start, temperatures getting into the mid to maybe high teens, perhaps not quite as mild as today. And with that breeze coming from the North Sea, those eastern coasts will be chilly. Bit of a change for Thursday, more cloud in the southwest, even a few showers for Somerset, Devon, Cornwall, perhaps parts of South Wales could catch a shower. Elsewhere though, another sunny one on Thursday. Still a brisk chilly breeze in the east, but elsewhere turning a bit warmer across the heart and southeast of England, where we could see those temperatures getting over 20 Celsius.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could spruce up your spring, as we have an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash to be won. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also give you the latest Mulberry handbag, and not one, but two sought-after designer watches. Make sure you don't miss out, as lines close on the 4th of April. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're
the failure
deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight.